Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to The Law. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini. And this afternoon, we are privileged to bring you a very important education as we have less than 30 days to the elections. We'll be right back. Right, so last week, the executive director or secretary, the executive secretary of the the National Media Commission, and Justice Shramsai, a law lecturer at GIMPA, spoke to us, gave us education, stressing that you have no right, absolutely no right, to lay your hand on a journalist during the election process because you think they have done some wrong. And you cannot also seize their gadget and demand that they delete the content because it is not favorable to you. Let's bring you a quick recap.
Under no circumstance, absolutely under no circumstance, is anybody allowed to manhandle a journalist or anybody else simply because you think that the person has come into an environment or has recorded anything they don't like.
There is no inherent requirement that when a journalist wants to do his or her work in a public space, he needs to look for whoever is in charge and ask for permission. That is actually contrary to the freedom and the independence of the media, which is guaranteed under the Constitution.
Sometimes the way we approach our work puts us too much in the line of danger in the way we relate to the security. Going forward, it seems to me that a certain approach that enables us to understand the security forces, that while they work to understand our work, will benefit the society greatly.
More attention should be paid to the new media, the persons who are bloggers, who carry their phones as cameras and are broadcasting live, Facebook live. We need to rope in those people as well, because trust me, and I'm not predicting doom, but a lot of the harm that will be happening in the election may be in respect of the new media.
It is so easy to set up your camera straight onto the clouds.
That's right.
So that whatever you are recording is immediately saving into the clouds. So if they order the deletion of material from your camera, it really does not help them much.
Granted that the requirement is for them to first seek permission, is it the argument that the punishment for not seeking permission is extrajudicial beating?
Okay.
Clearly, that is not the punishment. There should be, even if the law is that you should seek permission, there should be a procedure for punishing the breach of that law.
Anytime you are in doubt, check where and who is involved. Where it is a public person in a public place, it is safe for coverage. If it is a private person in a private place, it's a red area. You've got to be extremely careful. If it is a public person in a private place, as you said, unless there is crime, immorality, or anything regarding the use of public resources, you want to be extremely careful. If it is a private person in a public place, again, it's a safe area depending on the judgment of the journalist.
Right.
So, while these don't really delimit the lines very clearly, one can always use this as a guide.
If you have to ask permission, and which also means that the permission could be withheld. And so then the journalist's work, which is supposed to be independent, and whose freedom is guaranteed by the Constitution, is now subject to some administrative officer who may not even be high-ranking anywhere to determine whether the journalist can do his or her work. So clearly, the requirement for permission in public places is not grounded in law.
Right, so you just listened to George Sapong, who is Executive Secretary of the National Media Commission. He's also a lawyer. And Justice Shramsai, who is a law lecturer at the GIMPA law faculty on what you should not do when you encounter a media person doing their work during the elections or any time for that matter. So as you know, we have been treating matters regarding the elections coming in December 7. Today, we are so privileged to have senior law lecturer at the University of Ghana Law School, Dr. Abdul Basit Aziz Bamba, to assist us to learn about some of the do's and don'ts on election day. Doc, thank you very much for making time to come.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and good afternoon to your listeners and viewers.
Thank you very much. So, on election day, or even before election day, there are laws directing what you can do and what you cannot do, and you may find yourself in trouble. And this is not to only those of us who may be going to vote, but even the election officers, those who are supposed to assist you, facilitate your ability to be able to cast your ballot. They have been given some powers by the law, including that a presiding officer may be able to authorize your removal from the polling station because you are disrupting the activities at the polling station, or you are refusing to obey his or her lawful orders at the polling station. According to Regulation 30, they will be able to ask a police officer to remove you from the place. But a constitutional imperative is that no matter what happens, you must not be prevented from voting. So if they do something that the law does not allow them to do, or they are supposed to perform a certain function that they don't perform that function, the law says even they could suffer sanctions, including up to 6,000 Ghana cedis fine, or go to jail for 2 years. You too, there are things you are not supposed to do, including what the law calls personation, among other things. Unauthorized voting. You want to avoid being on the wrong side of the law on election day. So stay with us and learn as much as you can. So we get to the lecture room with Dr. Abdul Basit Aziz Bamba, or senior lecturer of the University of Ghana Law School. So thank you once again. Now, typically, what are we required to do or to refrain from doing in the elections?
Thank you so much. So even before we get to election day, it is important to note that our laws provide a very detailed framework in terms of what is lawful and unlawful before elections,
right,
during elections, and then after elections.
Right.
Now, it is important to underscore the importance of elections, particularly voting day, to our democracy. Ours is an electoral democracy. We have decided as a nation that every 4 years, our elected leaders have to be subjected to public scrutiny through elections for citizens to determine whether or not they will continue in office, or a new batch of elected public leaders should take over.
Right.
And it is through elections that citizens express judgments of approval or disapproval to elected officials or yet to be elected officials. By reason of the importance of election, our laws, particularly the Electoral Commission Act, the Representation of the People Act 1992, as well as the Public Election Regulations 2020 CI 127, have laid out a very comprehensive framework. Now, but before even I get to election day, there are certainly important things that need to happen even before election day. Now, the first point that I need to underscore is
it's important to note that, Dr. Basit Bamba is starting with us on pre-election. So pre-election day, the things that we must take note of. He just finished speaking about the importance and the imperative of our arrangement for elections as a constitutional participatory democracy. So pre-election.
Yeah, yes. Pre-election. And I'll be very brief with this. So before polling day, before election day, we expect that our voters register would have been finalized and certified. We expect that to happen before election day. In addition to that, we expect the EC to have appointed all the returning officers and the presiding officers and their assistants before election day. Okay. We also expect that the notice of election, the notice of poll should have been published. More importantly, the list of all polling stations should also have been published, and the law requires that it should be published on the website of the Electoral Commission. In addition to that, candidates and political parties are to begin copies of the list of polling stations within 60 days of the election. So I imagine that by now
they should have it.
They should have it. Yeah. In addition to that, there are certain voters lists that should have been prepared before election day. One is a transferred voters list. Two is a special voters list, the absentee voters list, as well as the proxy voters list. Right. Now, on election day, what are some of the do's and don'ts? I'm going to categorize the do's and don'ts on election day into a number of points or sub-issues. So let's look at the do's and don'ts for persons who are going to vote.
Right.
Then the do's and don'ts of EC officials. Okay. Then the do's and don'ts of candidates in the elections, as well as their polling or counting agents. Right. Now, let me start with the do's and don'ts of persons who are registered voters and as such are entitled to vote on polling day. Right. Now, the first important point to note is that in Ghana it is one person, one vote. Okay. So you as a voter, you are only entitled to cast only one vote, nothing more, nothing less, just one vote. The only exception that we make is when you've been appointed as a proxy. And when you've been appointed as a proxy, then you can vote for yourself and then vote for your principal. Right. But apart from the situation of you acting as a proxy, under no circumstances can you cast more than one ballot. If you do that, it is a crime for which you could be prosecuted and severely punished. Right. Again, the law anticipates or expects, requires that if you want to vote on election day, then you have to go to the polling station between the hours of 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m.
We are not America, so you can't deliver your vote by mail.
No, there's no mail-in vote. Okay. There's perhaps what we have, which is similar to that of the Americans, is the absentee vote, but we don't do mail-in votes here. So you have to go and join a queue between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. And by law, once you are in the queue before 5 p.m., you are entitled to vote. Right. But if you go a minute or a second after 5 p.m., the presiding officer is entitled to prevent you from voting, and we need to note that.
So what is important is that you must make sure that you are in the queue before 5 p.m.
Absolutely.
But if beyond that period, the presiding officer can exercise a discretion to disallow you. Actually,
there is even no issue of discretion here. If you want to just go by the strict test of the law. Right. It is between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. Once you are a second outside of 5 p.m., you should be prevented.
You are out.
You are out. You are completely out. All right. Yes. Now, one other dues, basically an entitlement of a voter during polling day is, in certain circumstances, voters spoil their ballots. So we've made provision for spoiling of ballots. If you spoil your ballot, it wasn't done deliberately or fraudulently, then you could speak to the presiding officer once he's satisfied that there is no ill motive to the destruction or the spoiling of the ballot, must give you a new ballot. Okay. But if for any reason he's not convinced that the ballot was genuinely spoiled, if he thinks that you deliberately or fraudulently or you had an ill motive in spoiling the ballot, then he can refuse you a new ballot, which means that you'll not be entitled. Okay. You'll not be entitled.
So spoiling your ballot could take the form of wrongly thumbprinting it. So
or pouring ink.
Or the ink that is sitting within the booth you mistakenly cause it to pour onto it, and therefore it will become invalid or it will be counted as a spoiled ballot, and you don't want your vote to be spoiled.
Not to count, yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so, and as Doc continues to educate us, he keeps referring to the presiding officer. The presiding officer. Now, in the scheme of things at the Electoral Commission, you have the commission or the commissioners at the national level being at the helm. And then you will have a district electoral officers coming before them. And then you have returning officers who are in charge of the constituencies. So every constituency has an EC officer who is in charge of that constituency. And you have presiding officers who are in charge of the polling stations. So when he says presiding officer, he's referring to that person who will be appointed to be responsible for the polling station where you will go and cast your ballots.
Absolutely, yeah. So we can now move to the duties, maybe the do's and don'ts of the EC officers.
Okay.
But even before I even get to the EC officers or officials, the other do's and don'ts as far as voters are concerned. Now, this also applies to candidates and political parties. It's a very strange provision, but the law provides that 500 meters of a polling station, no hard liquor is to be sold.
Right.
So you can't sell any alcoholic, hard alcoholic beverages within 500 meters of the polling station.
And the rationale is clear.
The rationale is clear. You don't want people to get drunk and start causing trouble at the polling station.
All right.
A similar provision is that within 500 meters of the polling station, you are not required to engage in any attempt to convince somebody, to come and vote for one person or the other. So the whole idea is to create a certain perimeter where you don't have any partisan political activity going on. Yes, and voters need to be particular about this provision.
Right. So when the law speaks about, you are talking about dues now. You are talking about the responsibilities. Okay, so where I'm coming to would go to the next level. So let's continue with it.
Yes. Yeah. Now, let's come to the dues as far as EC officials are concerned. As you rightly pointed out, on election day, the officials that voters are likely to see will be the presiding officer and his assistant. The returning officer may come from time to time because often he has other responsibilities besides just what he has to do at one polling station. Right. But the presiding officer's duty is basically to manage, take control, and supervise all activities at the polling station. So it is duty to ensure that the election materials are there on time. It is duty to ensure that the processes for voting are followed. And he has these assistants to help him execute his work. And one important thing, and this relates to the point you made about the power that he has to remove somebody who causing trouble from the polling station. It is his duty to maintain order at the polling station. Right. And because it is his duty to maintain order at the polling station, if he usually believes that anyone is causing trouble or is engaging in any activity that is going to impair or affect orderliness at the polling station, the presiding officer can cause the person's removal by just asking a security officer to remove that person from
the law says disruption of proceedings, and it's left to the discretion of the presiding officer. So is there not likely to be some disagreement as to what he or she believes is disruptive?
Yes, that is, sometimes with the law, you can't have things in black and white. And some amount of discretion have to be given to public officers to exercise. No, but you're right. It is only when a voter or somebody who has already voted perhaps is just hanging around the polling station. engages in an activity that disrupts proceedings.
Manifestly.
Manifest. It's clear that there's no doubt about that, that this is clearly a disruptive activity. It's causing trouble, so much noise, commotion.
Right.
Then the presiding officer can exercise this power.
Or he's doing things trying to prevent some other people from
being able to exercise
their rights.
So anything that disrupts voting, whether it's in terms of the work of the EC officials or in terms of preventing a registered voter from being able to cast his or her ballot, or even in terms of being preventing a polling agent from being able to do what he or she is supposed to do, then the presiding officer has a responsibility. Not only is it a right, but also a responsibility to ensure that that person is removed from the polling station. Yeah. But we also need to note that even though this power could be subject to abuse, any time that a presiding officer, and for that matter, any election official, exercises power in excessive manner, not in good faith, and all, the law makes it a crime. In that instance, the person might be in breach of his duties as an election official, and the law severely would deal with such infringement. So there's a discretion, all right, but that discretion also checked in terms of ensuring that any excesses could be punished.
So after the law provides this power to the presiding officer for the purposes of keeping order at the polling station, then the lawmaker proceeds to say the powers conferred by this regulation shall not be exercised to prevent a voter who is entitled to vote at a polling station from having the opportunity to vote at that polling station. What does that mean?
Now, what that means is that even if a person is being disruptive, no matter how disruptive a person may be, once a person hasn't already cast his ballot, voted, you must create an opportunity for the person to vote, and then afterwards you can deal with the person. That is, if you want to have the person removed from the
So whatever you do as a presiding officer or an officer of the Electoral Commission in this process, the thing you must have at the back of your mind is that what you do must not lead to preventing the voter from an opportunity to cast their ballots.
Absolutely, yes. So once the voter hasn't cast his or her ballot, whatever you do, if you want to exercise your power of remover, that should not be done at the expense of the person being able to vote. But once the person has voted, and really you believe that he or she is being disruptive, there you could remove the person from the polling station.
So they are supposed to tell the police officer at the polling station to remove you if you are being disruptive. And when they remove you, they may keep you somewhere or ask you to go away for a while. But they will still allow you to come in later when they feel you are sober or you are not disrupting.
So here they can exercise a bit of judgment. If they believe that your presence subsequently will not interfere with proceedings, they are entitled, the presiding officer is entitled to have you, especially when it comes to counting. Let's say at close of day when counting of ballots is going to be done. Of course, I mean, you should have the right as a citizen to be present, to witness the counting.
This kind of power that the presiding officer has extends even to party agents, political party representatives. So it's important for us to also empower the representatives to know the limits of the exercise of this power. Now, the Regulation 30, Sub-Regulation 3 says that where the person removed under Sub-Regulation 2 is an agent or a candidate or a political party, the presiding officer shall immediately inform the candidate or the representative of the political party who appointed the agent to replace the agent.
Now, this is a very, very important provision because the role of agents, polling agents and counting agents is essential to the whole electoral process. So you don't want a situation where the presiding officer will exercise his power of remover that will affect the ability of candidates to have the benefit of agents, polling agents or counting agents representing their interest. And the law has made it clear that the role of an agent is essentially to observe the proceedings and make sure that things are done in accordance with the relevant relevant.
But we
rules.
know through the petition that went to the Supreme Court on the presidential elections that their role is part of what gives credibility. Because of the transparency. Donald Trump is now complaining about fraud in certain places. But like they say, sunshine is the best disinfectant. Once the agents are there, and presiding officers must know that these are the people who contribute to giving credibility
to the whole process.
Absolutely. And so you should not, because you have some personal issues or some of sort, you know, in a way that is not helpful, seek to disrupt their presence at the polling station.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, and the law has adequately catered for this. I mean, if a polling agent has to be removed, then there must be a replacement to ensure
you have to do that immediately.
Okay. To ensure that the interests of the candidate or the political party are protected.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. So this is very good education. Pay attention. We will give you the opportunity to join us soon to ask a question or two, so that Dr. Aziz Bamba will have the opportunity to explain further to you or to answer your question. We're talking about the do's and the don'ts on election day. And what needs stressing at this point is that the power given to the presiding officer to ensure that there is order in the polling station does not extend to preventing a voter from the opportunity to cast their ballots. Whatever you do, it must be behind the back of your mind that you must necessarily, because it's a constitutional imperative, give the voter the opportunity to cast their votes.
Maybe one important point that has been made as far as polling agents are concerned, the law is clear that the non-attendance of a polling agent will not invalidate anything that has been done at the polling station. Okay. And that is why it is important that when the presiding officer exercises his power to remove a polling agent, there is an immediate replacement.
The next question then is, what if this individual being asked to be removed has committed an offense?
If you have committed an offense, here discretion has to be used here by the presiding officer as well as the security officers who might be around. If the person has committed an offense, because of the essential role of a polling agent, as much as possible, let there be a replacement for that polling agent before the polling agent who is suspected of having committed a crime being dealt with in accordance.
That's the polling agent.
Yeah.
What if it is not a polling agent, but it's a voter who is coming to vote and has committed an offense for which the presiding officer, you know, authorizes the police officer to effect the arrest?
It's important that arrangements should be made for that voter to cast his or her ballot before he or she is dealt with.
It's taken away.
Yeah, because I mean, the right to vote is a constitutional right. And the fact that you have committed a crime doesn't take away your right to vote. So still, the person's right to vote has to be safeguarded. Then afterwards, he could be dealt with in accordance with the criminal.
In fact, we're a country that has ensured that even if you're a convicted, you know, person in prison, you have an opportunity to vote in prison.
Exactly. Right. The only exception that our law has made is where, as a registered voter, for example, you commit an electoral offense.
Right.
Then you may go to jail for 2 years or pay 6,000 Ghana cedis, and you may be disqualified from being a registered voter for 5 years.
5 years.
It is only in those circumstances that you may not be able to vote, but otherwise, even converse. And our law is quite progressive on this. In some countries, they have prisoners on very serious offenses who are prevented from voting, but ours is not like that.
Right. So ours, unless you have committed such an offense, you have been taken to the court, you have been found guilty, and on the basis of that, you are either going to jail for 2 years or less, or either you are being asked to pay a fine of about 6,000. And then in addition to that, the law requires that for some of the offenses, you are debarred or you are barred from ever being given the opportunity to register as a voter for 5 years. Okay. And one of those offenses will be the offense that the law calls treating. Right? And treating, according to the law, says a person commits an election offense of treating under this law when that person corruptly pays, wholly or in part, the expenses of giving or providing meat, drink, entertainment, or provision to or for any person, group of persons for purposes of influencing voting by that person or on account of that person having voted in a particular way. So on election day, or even before election day, we are not supposed to be doing this?
We're not supposed to be. It's actually one of the provisions in PNDC Law 284 that appears to have been observed more in breach. You know, because you hear of many rumors or allegations about 100 Ghana cedis being given to people.
They are facilitating. They are coming to vote.
And you appear that even busing people to the polling station is a form of treating, especially if it is done with the intention of getting them to vote in one way or the other. Right. Unfortunately, I don't think we have paid so much attention to this particular provision, even though it's been in our law since 1992. But many of the things that our political parties do smell and look like treating.
All right. And the other thing we are not supposed to do is there's something called unauthorized voting. What exactly is that one? And then the one about personation.
Personation, yes. Unauthorized voting is where a person is not entitled to vote. So if you have underage voting, for example, under our laws, you must be 18 years and above to be able to vote. If you have somebody less than 18 voting, then clearly that is unauthorized voting. If you have somebody who is not registered, a registered voter but attempting to vote, that will be unauthorized voting. Or it could be that you are a registered voter, you voted already, and then you are trying to engage in double or multiple voting. That also will be unauthorized voting. Okay. So any voting or attempt at voting that contravenes the rules on voting would be considered unauthorized voting.
Right. And if you are caught doing this, you should be taken to court. And when you are taken to court, you are looking to paying a fine, if you are found guilty, maximum
of 6,000 Ghana or maximum imprisonment 2 years or both. Or both, and then you'll be disqualified for 5 years.
For being registered.
For being a registered voter.
Okay.
From the expiration of your sentence.
Sentence. Yes. Okay. What about the personation? Is it also one common way that people may, infringe the law?
Personation is essentially trying to be somebody that you are not, and that is also one of the problems that we tend to have during voting. You may have people. Somebody look alike, then trying to be somebody who is not. And the law takes a very serious view of this matter. If you try to present yourself to vote as somebody that you are not, that will constitute personation and the same punishment as for unauthorized voting.
Right. So we can treat one other aspect about that and then we can proceed. How about the issues of undue influence, which is something that the law says we should not be doing?
Now, undue influence is also one of the acts prohibited by the law. Essentially, undue influence is where you try to influence somebody to vote or to refrain from voting through a number of things. It could be through the use of threats. It could be through violence. It could be through intimidation. It could be the use of force. And one interesting provision actually under undue influence is the one about divine care. So if you tell if you vote, Antoine Yama, whatever is going to deal with you, that is undue influence. You have committed an offense. You've committed an offense. Or if you tell somebody a certain illness, spiritual curse or illness will befall the person, if the person votes a certain way or refrains from voting, that is criminal. And if you are convicted, the same punishment as
we know this to happen. We have known this to happen a lot in the primary, elections, so to speak, where people go take money and they are threatened that if you don't vote for this person, Antoine or somebody will, strike you dead. And also the law in this regard of undue influence talks about abduction. And we know how people are gathered, and before the election day, you don't have your liberty. You must stay within a certain premises with the people. Interesting, very interesting. So if you are just joining us, this is the law, and we're treating election day, the do's and the don'ts. And we have the rare privilege of interacting and being educated by Dr. Abdul Basit Aziz Bamba, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Law School. Now, we should be opening the Zoom now for you to join in the conversations. So if you have any questions you want to ask, you can feel free. So look at the television, and you see the Zoom ID and you see the Zoom passcode. Always remember, make sure you are muted once you join. But once you are identified and you are put on to speak, then you unmute so that you can be heard. Thank you very much. Right. So we have looked at for the voters, for the election officials. You structure this in 3 phases. It looks like there is one other phase that we have to deal with.
Yes.
Right.
Now, one other aspect that we need to look at in terms of the do's and don'ts have to do with the polling agents and the candidates standing the presidential and parliamentary elections.
Okay.
Now, the law gives them, of course, I mean, they are also required to obey all the rules that all of us have to obey.
Right.
In addition to that, they've been given, the candidates, for example, have been given the right to appoint polling agents and counting agents to observe proceedings. One other right of candidates is that they can be at the polling station with their spouses. The law allows them to be at a polling station with their spouses, and the presiding officer cannot remove them from the polling station.
Actually expected to give them a certain special treatment.
Absolutely, yes, because they are candidates.
Right. Just like accredited journalists, media who are supposed to come to the place, the same treatment to those who have been accredited to be at the place, the same treatment to security officers who are supposed to be at the place. That's the treatment to be accorded to the candidates and their spouses when they come into that place. Remember that before we started, Dr. Aziz Bamba had told us about the pre-election day things that we need to observe. And he spoke about the 500 meter rule, where you are not supposed to try to influence, to be seen to influence somebody to vote. So within 500 meters of the polling station is prohibited. If you have to do that, do it somewhere else, not within 500 meters. Don't go and stand by the place and say that is where you're going to get people to vote for your party or your candidate by dishing out food, dishing out drink, or even giving money. All of that too will constitute cheating, and the law prohibits it. He also spoke about the 500 meters rule against selling of alcoholic beverages. You don't do that, and the rationale, as he explained, is very clear. We want to have a peaceful process. We don't want to give an opportunity for people to get drunk and then, under the influence, cause trouble. But there is one thing that I think often I don't hear people talk about, which I would like you to help us on before we move on to whatever we have to do. It could be pre-election or whatever it is. The offense of defacement of notices. I have seen that people are showing, videos, a lot of that happening. People have gone, torn people's, posters and things. and the offense of publication of false statements. A lot of it goes on during this period. What can you say about that?
Now, these offences have been part of our law since 1992. Okay. And as I indicated, it appears you haven't paid particular attention to some of these crimes. Right. Yes, actually, the law makes it a crime to deface. No, what it says is that a person who, without any lawful excuse, destroys, mutilates, defaces, or removes a notice which is exhibited under the authority of this act or the regulations, goes on. The person commits an offense. And the person is liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 200 penalty units or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 6 months. So it is very clear, especially when you find EC notices, notice of election or poll, rate of election, being removed, being defaced. That is a crime. And I think citizens should pay particular attention to that.
How about the aspect of publication of false statements?
So the publication of false statements is also a crime under Section 19 of PNDC Law 28.
If you don't mind, let me read that portion, because I think the people who engage particularly in political conversation, you know, don't pay attention to this law. It says a person commits an election offense if he, before or during an election, for the purpose of effecting or preventing the election of a candidate, makes, and you know, a lot of false news will come up on election day, particularly. People will churn them out. So if you make or publish, or you cause to be published, or be made or published by words, whether written or spoken, or by song, note that, a statement which is false, or which that person knows or has reason to believe is false in relation to the personal character of another person or a political party for the purpose of effecting or preventing the election of another candidate or the conduct of a political party, or before or during an election knowingly publishes a false statement of the withdrawal of a candidate. Note that. And it happens that, oh, this candidate has withdrawn. They say he's not interested anymore. For the purpose of promoting or procuring the return of another candidate.
So this is, it's quite broad. It's quite broad. So it is not only during election, but before election. So, so the idea is we want the election to be based on good causes, not based on maligning somebody, saying bad things about a person that are not true. So the whole idea is that the citizens, voters, should be in a position, they should have the information that enable them to make the right choice, and not through misinformation, not through fake news. And now that fake news has become maybe a popular expression to use. And the punishment for engaging in that is engaging in false publications with the intent of making voters not vote for a particular person, the punishment is quite severe. And I think perhaps this is one of the provisions that we need to point out clearly to not only voting officials, not only election officials, but also citizens and our own political parties.
Thank you very much. Dr. Abdul Basit Aziz Bamba is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Law School. Let's have Inusa Abdul Razak. Thank you very much for joining us on the law.
Okay, good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers. Please, on the issue of unauthorized voting, the speaker stated that someone could be said to be an unauthorized voter when the person is underage. So I wanted to find out, in a situation where the person is registered and has his or her name in the register, but you perceive the person to be underage, can you at that moment initiate any process to stop the person from voting?
Thank you, Abdul Razak. Thank you for your question. I'm looking at the Zoom and I'm seeing quite a number of you. So can we take a couple of your questions and then get Dr. Aziz Bamba to respond to them. So who is next? Okay, Adam Abdul Malik. Malik, let's hear you. Hello, Malik. Okay, let's arrange and get. Always remember, unmute yourself. Immediately you have been identified to speak, unmute yourself. And when you come on, make sure you are muted. Don't keep your mic on. Keep your mic muted. Patrick. Hello, Patrick. Okay. Let's have Doc respond to the question that was asked by Inusa, right?
Now, this is a very, very important question. Remember that before we get to polling day, would have gone through the challenge process after registration. The voters register would have been certified. Right. So the presumption is that anybody whose name...
And you said earlier that the register would have already been given to the parties or whoever must receive one within 60 days before the election. Yeah.
So once a person's name is in the register, the person is entitled to vote. Okay. If you think that even the person looks underage, is an underage person, no. Once a person's name has been certified as qualified to vote, the person is entitled to vote.
The period you should have challenged that person
should have been during the challenge process before the register was certified.
Right. Okay, so I'm seeing a number of you, George, Mamiesi, who again? I'm seeing a number of persons. Yes, who is next? Okay, I understand you have just some little difficulties. We should resolve them. There are too many of you on the Zoom who want to contribute, and you should be able to do so immediately. Just listen to my instructions. You are muted already, so there are no interference. Then, once I call your name, listen. Once I call your name, remember to unmute yourself before you start to speak. It's as simple as that. All right. So who is next? Hello, Pharrell.
Oh, hello.
Go ahead.
Hello. Oh, okay. The lecturer made mention of something about.
Hello.
I think then they know operating close to a drinking spot or something. Yes. My question is, on that day, is he trying to say that if there's a drinking spot around that police station, that drinking spot shouldn't operationalize, or the police station should not be found around 500 meters close to where a drinking spot is? My second question is, he made mention of something like, if how do you call it? If a candidate is claimed to be disqualified or something, while it is not the case, there'll be a punishment. I would like to know, how severe will that punishment be? Will the results be annulled? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. The question of publication of false statements and also the 500-meter rule. Yes.
Yes, regarding the 500-meter rule, the expectation is that before the EC designates an area as a polling station, it will take that into account. Because if a drinking bar is already within that radius, it could be a bit unfair to locate a polling station in such a manner that it will be within the 500-meter rule. Right. But be it as it may, the moment it happens that a polling station has been sited at a particular place, even if there is a pre-existing drinking bar that falls within that radius, it affects it. Okay. And the rule has to be complied, which means that no alcoholic beverages can be sold in that drinking bar.
So he was asking about the sanctions for publication of false statements. He was asking about the sanctions for that, particularly where somebody makes a claim, publishes a false statement that one candidate has withdrawn for the purposes of promoting another candidate being...
Yes. What the law provides by way of punishment is that if you are convicted you are liable to a fine not exceeding 500 penalty unit. That's about 6,000 Ghana cedis.
Right.
Or to a term of imprisonment not exceeding 2 years.
Right.
Or to both. So
to both.
You may be asked to pay a fine of 6,000 Ghana cedis, or you may be sent to prison for maximum of 2 years.
Right.
Or you'll be asked to both pay the fine, and in addition to that, you go to prison.
And because this is about false statement regarding the character of the individual, you must also not forget that you have a right. That candidate has a right to sue
for defamation.
Defamation. But he was asking, if that happened and it affected the other candidate, will there be something against the results that the other
that's difficult to say, but right. if it happens,
it's not the making of the electoral commission.
Yes, if it's on actually a massive scale,
okay,
and you could say that voting wasn't done substantially in accordance
and was
with
orchestrated
the
by
rules,
your opponents,
orchestrated by this false statement, and also
okay.
by your opponents.
Right.
I can see a case being made,
right.
perhaps for challenging the election results.
Thank you very much. Who do I have next? Hello, Buampong.
Hello.
Yes, let's hear you, Buampong.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, and a good afternoon to your viewers and listeners as well. My question is, in as much as the elections closes exactly at 5 p.m., it might not be a deliberate attempt for me to be late. But then I've been in traffic for a while and I arrived, say, 5:10 p.m. Can I still, as a matter of fact, push to cast my votes?
Okay. Thank you, Buapong, for your question. Yes, Doc.
It's a no.
All right.
It's a categorical no. Once you fall outside the 5 p.m. time frame, you'll not be able to cast your vote. But if you are lucky that for any reason polls are adjourned, sometimes the EC for one reason or the other can adjourn polls, then you have another opportunity to cast your vote.
Right. So it's a right that you have to assert. Now, once you have lost it, you can't assert it.
You can't assert that right.
Okay.
It's a right that has certain conditions for its exercise. Once you don't fulfill those conditions, you cannot exercise that right.
Right. You spoke about adjournment of poll, which sometimes can happen. Mm-hmm. And the law, as in CI 127, suggests that if there has been some disruptive activities, if there has been a flood, if there has been a storm or something of the nature, that practically prevents the ability of the voting to continue, the presiding officer can work with the returning officer, that's the one in charge of the constituency, and with the approval of the electoral commission, postpone the election to the next day, and that they can postpone even further for a maximum of 7 days, after which it can't go beyond that. So once it is postponed, then he could come the next day.
Come the next day.
All right.
And then cast his ballot. Yes.
Okay. Hello, Richard.
Yes, please.
Please go ahead.
Please, okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for your panelists. I want to know about the defacing of the posters on walls. How do we address that thing, since the politicians or the parties don't post their poster at the appropriate place? I almost have encounter with that so many times. How do we address it going forward? That's my question.
But Richard, how do you determine the appropriate or inappropriate place
to post? Yeah.
Yeah. For example, on my wall.
Okay.
Or in my wall, my one is a billboard or something like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Richard.
When I deface it, do I offend the law or do I go?
Okay. Thank you.
That's what I want to know.
All right.
Thank you.
That is an interesting issue, because there's also an issue about the right to enjoy your property without any undue interference with that right. Right. So, for example, that's why in some instances you see that landowners will post no bill. So it's an indication to everybody, to the entire world, that my property is not for the purpose of posting any documents or notices and all. If you do that, perhaps you could assert your right to protect your property. But besides that, I wonder if it will be lawful for you to depose a rate of an election-related notice, particularly if it's coming from the Electoral Commission.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So there are other aspects about prevention of election by force, corruption, intimidation. You know, okay, I think intimidation, we have spoken a bit about that. Can you, on the basis of that, give us your final, you know, as it were, take as you leave us, and some advice to all of us?
I mean, what we need to note, I mean, when you look at all the election-related offenses, they seek to achieve three main things. One is that they seek to safeguard the polling station, to ensure the polling station is safe, in a state of orderliness, so that you can have a smooth polling. They also seek to protect the election officials. In addition, they also seek to protect the candidates, the polling agents, and also the voters' right to vote. So anything that has an impact on any of these three areas, whether or not you know that the crime is called intimidation or what have you, know that it is prohibited by election laws. It is important that we all note elections are very, very important to us, and we all must make it a point to respect people's right to vote. So let's all make it a point that we go by the rules on election day, particularly those of us who want to vote. Make sure you are in the queue between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. so you can cast your vote.
There's one lady who's joining us, and we should take a lady's comment or question before we close. Hello.
My question was, if you happen to find yourself to have lost your ID, is there any way you'll be allowed to vote?
All right. Thank you very much.
That's a very, very important. That's a very, very important question. Yes. If you lose your ID, once they can trace your name with the list that they have, you may be allowed to vote.
Right. But as long as there is time before the election, seek the process of replacing your ID.
Absolutely.
And that is also easy to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Abdul Basit Aziz Bamba, a senior lecturer, University of Ghana Law School. We can't thank you enough.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Right. So this has been The Law with me, Samson Ladi Anyenini. God willing, next week we'll come your way with another edition of the show.